It's more than fair to say that today's North American gambling industry is its own version of the Fast and Furious, with companies across many verticals trying to keep track of new markets, the arrival of prediction markets, pushing the envelope on the use of artificial intelligence, and staying on top of the various rules and regulations in Alberta, Ontario, and regulated states in the US of A. Among those companies striving to keep pace in the race is GeoComply, the Vancouver-based geolocation, anti-fraud, and cybersecurity business co-founded by Anna Sainsbury and David Briggs back in 2011. These days, GeoComply is led by a former senior executive for FanDuel, FOXBet, and Flutter Entertainment, and we're pleased he's making his maiden appearance on the Gaming News Canada show. So we welcome GeoComply's Chief Executive Officer since March 2025, Kip Levin. Kip, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Steve. It's great to be here.
Hey, Kip, I just mentioned in the intro just the crazy pace, and that seems to be a common theme every week when we do this podcast right now. It just feels like everybody's heads spinning, or including your host here. It's such a fast-moving industry. Like, can you remember a time from your experience in the gaming industry where there's so much going on?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I came into the business in 2014. I was then sort of predecessor for Flutter under the Betfair brand. So Betfair had a business in the US. It was a horse racing business. And then we had an online casino business in New Jersey when that launched in 2013. So I was actually a GeoComply client all the way back to when I came in 2014. I think 2018 was... I never thought I would see anything crazier than what happened in 2018 when obviously the Supreme Court struck down PASPA and, everything just went so fast and chaotic and so on. But right now, having come back in, I was out of the business for a couple of years between, late 23, 24, coming back in now and seeing everything that's going on. I'm like, oh, this might actually be crazier than and faster paced than what we went through in 2018.
Hey, just to poke your memory, do you remember pre-2018 a conversation you had or a newspaper article you read or just something that made you think, hey, this is going to happen. There's going to be a dramatic shift here with gambling in the US.
I remember there were a couple things that happened. I remember when I think shortly after I joined, Adam Silver had put out an op-ed in the New York Times, actually, that stated that it was time to legalize the online sports betting out into the open. That was a big step forward, right? Because that was the first of the major leagues that were out publicly stating it was time. I think, obviously, the AGA getting behind and endorsing legalization of online sports betting was another big moment that I didn't fully appreciate at the time, but that led to a lot of momentum. But I was learning the industry at a rapid pace. I came from outside the business, so it was I was actually fortunate to have a couple of years in it. I spent a lot of time in our European business and our Australian businesses, really learning what it looked like before it actually came. And then I was I think that better prepared us to figure out what our strategy would be if and when the Supreme Court ruled how it ultimately ruled. So, yeah,
it's ironic. I mean, in David Stern's NBA, one of the conditions of getting an expansion team in Toronto way back when was removing NBA games from Proline. They were all retail sportsbook back then. So it is kind of crazy in some ways that it was the NBA that kind of took the lead on that.
Well, I got an opportunity to spend a little time with David in his sort of post commissioner life. And he was really curious at that point. Parimutuel horse racing was really the only form of legal online sports betting in the US. And he was really interested. And that was the primary business that Betfair was in back when I started. He was really interested in learning more about that. And I said, it's ironic that you're so curious and interested in this when you were the person who actually came in and shut it down. He's like, well, people make mistakes and times have changed and now it's time. So he was, at that point, he was also fully on board with what Adam's vision was.
Yeah, and I think in fairness to Stern too, it's just a much different time, right? It was, I think we forget sometimes, we didn't see the first sports websites until like 1994. I mean, when I worked at the NHL Players Association during the lockout in 1994-95, I was carrying around a 2-pound cell phone back then. I mean, it's really not that long ago. And when we talk about, the Fast and Furious comparison, I mean, that goes with regards to the internet as well.
Yeah.
Hey,
seeing it today too. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I want to ask you just, you mentioned you had dealt with GeoComply in your previous roles, but I just wonder, like, how different has your experience been working in a different sector of the industry?
Well, it's definitely a different perspective, right? From being on the operator side to being on then the technology supplier side. It's been fun for me actually, because all the companies, the great companies that we were competing with when I was at FanDuel and then later at FOXBet are now my clients, and so I get to spend time with them and talk about strategy and so on. So it's definitely a different perspective. It's obviously very helpful, especially as we're building new products and expanding on what we do. I think GeoComply was founded to solve the basic problem of protecting the borders and making sure that people couldn't use basic commercially available VPNs and location proxies and spoofing techniques to hide their location and play in a state or a province where it was legal. It evolved really, really fast, because what ultimately happened was the business became so big in the United States that you started to see that it was no longer just somebody a state away who wanted to play blackjack during their lunch break. It was, now you're seeing organized crime, and very sophisticated organized crime and cyber criminals who are who saw online gaming, right? If you think about a new province opening up recently, right, like you saw with Alberta, it's typical that you'd have a lot of bonusing and promotions, and different states have different rules around, different provinces have different rules around how they do it. But I remember when New York launched, there were operators that were doing thousands of dollars as a deposit match, for example, to sign up for an account. And that invited another level of criminals to come in and take stolen identities and from sanctioned countries, right, and take tens of thousands of them and run them through the system, create accounts and extract the value and the money. And that still goes on today at a large scale, whether it's stealing bonus generosity, or whether it's actually trying to launder money, whether it's a big sophisticated cyber crime ring, or if it's just some creative kids in a garage who are really good with technology. It's a big target, and so GeoComply has evolved over the years to sort of use our location data and our advanced location spoofing technology to be the first line of defense for a lot of the operators. And so when Ann and David had decided to bring somebody from the outside, that was what really got me excited about coming here. Was not to be in the compliance business, was to be in the fraud and identity and protection business for the gaming industry, and now a lot of other industries that are using our technology to protect their digital businesses as well.
There's so much discussion right now around, especially here in Canada, I think it's true of the US as well, around, advertising and problem gambling and some of those issues where anti-gambling advocates have come out and see this as an opportunity. But at the same time, to what you mentioned, we are also seeing, an increase in fraud. I think there's a big challenge for companies like GeoComply to kind of keep up with the Joneses with AI and it's almost like drug testing in sports, where the people using steroids are always one step ahead of the drug testers, but they do eventually get caught. And I think when I look at a company like GeoComply, I think it does make a case why a regulated market is better than an unregulated market.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's the consumer protections exist for a reason, right? And they do work. And I think that you see it, whether it's cases of problem gambling, whether it's integrity issues you see with major sports. Like, I think everybody equates the fact that you start to hear more about some of these issues coming out in the media, but they're coming out in the media because the operators have the data to be able to catch them. When people were their only option was to gamble in offshore sites and so on, like that information was off somewhere, and there weren't the same protections and guardrails in place. And so I think that's the whole point of regulation in the first place.
I want to spend a few minutes on Alberta, Kip, and again, it's pretty obvious and quite public from an operator standpoint. Like people see the ads, they see the post on social media. We know. I think everybody who's following the industry, even casually, there's 18 operators came out on July 13th, open for business. I think there's about 22 websites in Alberta. For a company like GeoComply that kind of operates in the background in terms of mainstream attention, what does that look like for a company like yours getting from point A to point B when a market launches?
Yeah, I mean, well, we play a couple roles. Obviously, we're helping our clients and customers stay compliant with the regulations. Obviously, so we have, I don't know what percentage. We have a large percentage of the operators that are now live in Alberta are our customers, but we spend a lot of time ahead of that because a lot of we have relationships with all the regulators, as you can imagine, in Canada and the U.S. and so on. So we help them. I think we have a different point of view of the regulations they're putting in place. They're not the same from province to province, from state to state, so on. So I think that they view us as a strong partner in helping them determine what works, what doesn't. We also have a KYC product as well that a lot of our clients use to onboard new customers. That's always sort of a critical part of launching. There's always, you see a rush of people coming in right as soon as you flip the switch. A lot of new people that then all of a sudden have to go from potentially playing on a site where they never had to register all that information that they have to register. Happens very quickly. You see a lot of drop off. We were able to go in and sit down with the regulators in Alberta, so share some of our best practices as to look, you don't have to have it as tight. You can do fuzzy matching on address verification because people make typos here or there, or you might be looking up against third-party data that's says their address says road, and they might have typed in RD, and you should still let them through, right? Like that's a good KYC. And so we have a lot of experience in not just the geolocation compliance part of operating in a regulated market, but all the other parts as well. And so I think that they see us as a good trusted partner in there. So we're actively involved from for months, if not years, in advance of new jurisdictions going live.
Yeah, and I'll mention too, like GeoComply, having spent some time over the past 5 years with people like John Pappas and Lindsay Slater, that GeoComply has been very much an advocate for regulated jurisdictions, and that even goes back, I think, to 2023 when the Quebec Online Gaming Coalition was formed, and Lindsay was pretty, was an advocate for that organization up and running. I mean, you do provide a bit of a unique perspective, having worked for an operator now at GeoComply, Kip, in terms of seeing how regulated markets are created in different parts of the world. I'd love to get your thoughts just on what you've seen from the AGLC and the Alberta iGaming Corporation in creating this market.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that I think what's helpful, and I can't speak that specifically because I wasn't directly involved in a lot of the conversations, but from what our team has expressed back, right? Like it's there's a lot of pre-existing learnings to sort of take and best practices to take, and I think that they did that, right? And they were in a good position to do that and go. And now I think our hope is that other provinces will see that it's another successful launch, right? And you've got two, and our hope is that others will follow on from there.
We're recording this podcast on Monday, July 20th, so exactly the 1 week anniversary. I don't know if you call it 1 week an anniversary, but we're 1 week in the market here. Have your team flagged any trends, or are there any general observations about what you've seen so far? And I know it's a really short sample size.
Well, it's a short sample size that happened to overlap also with the World Cup final. So I think it's early data. I can't really compare it to how much of the market was captured versus other launches. I think generally the response has been, and we've heard this from our clients, that people are pleased with the volume of people that have sort of come over, right? Because they had other options before all of a sudden.
Right.
They had, and so I think comparatively, right? It's different than launching a new state in the U.S., right? Where there generally weren't a lot of other options. And, but I think that generally people were pleased with the volume was high. And then, obviously, again, the timing was great with the World Cup. The semifinals midweek, and then the final yesterday, I think we saw something north of 50% of all the new accounts that had signed up were active yesterday during the World Cup final. We don't see any of the sort of transactional information. We just see which accounts are logging in and active. But it was well north of 50% of all of the people who had signed up for accounts. So I assume, again, I haven't spoken to any directly, but I assume that on the operator side, they're pretty pleased with it too. Much less they're also very pleased that there were no goals, and so as fans, we're not very excited about the outcome of the match. But to have a match where I'm sure more than half of those people all had Messi to score a goal and so on, and those things don't happen, then I'm sure it was a pretty good day for the sports books as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have to believe that it was the bookmakers had taken a bit of a beating, because from a sports fan, as you mentioned, I mean, the World Cup was sensational. You had all the stars, Messi, Mbappe, Haaland, Kane, Bellingham, all the superstars really stepped up and delivered in the tournament. So I'm thinking, and I haven't seen a lot of data. I did see a story that supports your theory that the 1-goal final was good for the bookmakers.
Yeah,
but I mean, other than that, it had been a pretty rough ride over those last 5 or 6 weeks.
I think so too. It's hard to spend 10 years as an operator and watch any sporting event now and not think about wondering what the margin is on this match. But yeah, I'm sure they probably clawed back a little bit yesterday. But generally, it was probably a very, very friendly World Cup for the bettors.
Yeah, I think talking about this too, Kip, it reminds our listeners, and also it reminds me that iGaming is such an important part of the Alberta and Ontario models. And when you look south the border, I think we're still maybe 8 states now with Maine coming on that have regulated iGaming. And the Alberta model, stakeholders out there have already identified they expect that Alberta will kind of follow Ontario, and we'll probably see like 80+% of handle will come from online casino. Yeah,
it's interesting. Obviously that was my first experience in it, having run the online casino in New Jersey back between 2014 and 2018, and seeing the growth in it. I mean, I think it's the growth there. The New Jersey market, which has been online, since 2013, is still growing. If you look at just the iGaming and pull that out of it, and not just the sports. Sports gets all the media attention because it's fun to talk about and so on, but it is a huge business. And I think, it's a lot of the reason. I think you see a lot of general questions and frustration around why the offshore markets are still so big, even in the US and even in states where sports betting is legal. And it's because the states that don't have both still lose out to that, right? And the sports books, the offshore sports books, can run at a really low margin because they make their money on iGaming. And so I think, again, you see a lot of product innovation to get around and fill the gaps, because the demand is huge, which is obviously you see that in here in Ontario and Alberta. You see it in the biggest states by far are the states in the US that have both, including poker, by the way, which, I've been running the PokerStars business in the US just after COVID. Poker was a huge bounce back during that time. So we'll see. I mean, I think it will happen slowly. I think that we are one of the many sort of vendors that sort of help put the consumer protection framework in place, which I think is what holds it back a bit. So I think you might see some changes coming down the line, but we'll see.
Is your iGaming platform ready for Alberta? Bede Gaming is ready to support your new market entry with a SOC 2 compliant platform, multi-tenant infrastructure model, and unlimited configurability. Future-proof your iGaming performance today with a solid foundation for your next province. Bede Gaming is your partner for success. Get in touch at bedegaming.com. I think just on that too, Kip, for people and absolutely people in the industry should take seriously problem gambling and making sure there are great responsible gaming tools in place, and that's something that all stakeholders should be actively involved in and supporting research in that. But I mean, the genie really is out of the bottle in terms of online gaming, and it's not going to disappear. And it feels sometimes like people just think that if we ban advertising or if we stop opening up markets, that gambling's going to go away. And I just don't see that happening.
No, I agree. I mean, the data is there. If you look at the last 15 years of what we've seen, the data is all there, and it's again that's why you see all these new forms of kind of riding new regulatory rails to meet the gaps that the states and the provinces that haven't regulated it yet or have left, right? And there's still huge gaps in the United States, which is why we're now all talking about prediction markets and so on there, and sweepstakes casinos and all these other mechanisms that have been created. And by the way, it's all technology, right? The technology is only getting more sophisticated, so we talk about it from the fraud perspective, but it also creates new mechanisms for people to, creative entrepreneurs to meet the demand. And it's just going to keep happening and until you come up with the right regulatory structure to give everybody options.
You mentioned fraud a few minutes ago, Kip, and I was hoping you could maybe dig a little deeper in that. Just the kind of the trends that you and your team seeing today, and then how are the bad actors out there becoming more sophisticated?
Well, I mean, we talked about AI, and I should have talked about how much we're invested in it. I mean, I think it's a critical part to how we operate every day. We've tried to push the envelope with giving our teams AI tools. We just recently rolled out a few new clients. Used to take us 2 to 3 weeks to get a client up and running with our technology. We just had a full implementation done with a very big prospective client for a proof of concept test. We had it integrated with we had our AI servers talking to their AI servers. We had it integrated in 20 minutes.
Wow.
That's just one example of the power of investment in AI that we're starting to see. It's changed how we operate. It's changed, obviously, how we're writing and deploying code, responding to some of the challenges that we see, scaling our infrastructure, all those things. Now, on the downside of it, right, as you said before, if you take, for example, a fraudster that has 10,000 stolen identities that they've stolen from the dark web, right? And they're trying to hide where they are, and they're trying to run that through and create 10,000 accounts, on a handful of operators to try to extract value for whatever purpose it might be, whether they're trying to take advantage of the bonusing, they're trying to actually launder money, they're trying to just generally steal money through people's accounts. The ability for them to now do that at speed using AI has gone through the roof, right? So it's much harder to see if our systems are stopping them, like they can learn as to how we're stopping them, and then they could make another attempt, in really short order. Whereas it might have taken them a week to sort of pull back and be like, all right, that didn't work. We need to try to hide in a different way or do on. And so I think it is an arms race that is now moving at a very, very different pace. And I think if we weren't innovating and changing our own models, right? So we have a big investment in AI infrastructure, machine learning, data scientists who are updating how all of our fraud modeling works. If we hadn't made that investment, it just would be impossible to keep up.
I mean, you're 16 months in the job now. I mean, have you even seen in that 16 months a shift in the way AI is employed, and the way you're hiring people, and how the business is shifting?
I mean, yeah, it's staggering, right? I mean, it really is. I started my career around the time people were starting to buy things online. Spent a lot of years in the e-commerce world because I was fascinated how the internet was changing how people shopped online or consumed media online. Obviously, then got into this business. Saw the advent of mobile and how all of a sudden we were building websites for people who wanted to shop online, and then mobile kind of disrupted all of that. Saw the impact that social media had in terms of how we market and reach new customers. I mean, this is like all of those combined, I think, and it's not just talk. I mean, it's affected everything. And you're right. Like in 16 months, like the change from when I walked in the door here to the way that we operate the business today, deploy new products, build new products, service our customers, all those things have changed dramatically, right? And it's been fascinating. It's been fun. It's been what's always sort of led me to, new stops in my career. So,
is there something I'm sure in your days working for an operator, you get that adrenaline rush from a new online poker product, or I'm sure you're a sports fan, so there's a World Cup or an Olympics or a big event coming up, and you're talking to your sports traders on it. I just wonder, where do you get that adrenaline rush in your new role?
Yeah, I'd say, look, we're talking to a lot of new industries about the power of the technology that we've built, right, from a fraud and identity standpoint. And I think that the thing now, I mean, beyond watching the innovation curve, I mean, I've been in meetings where within an hour we have somebody who's a really sort of smart AI engineer who builds a new product that's ready to deploy within a day, less than a day, a couple hours. So that obviously is really exciting to see, coming from kind of a legacy software world where getting new products out would take months. So seeing that pace is really exciting. But I think right now the big thing for us is like we're out talking to all these new industries to say the future of sort of protecting online businesses, mobile businesses, from all of these threats is identity, right? And who's building the best fraud and identity products. I think that location as a signal and all of the data that we built around the location signal as an identifier for bad actors, to me is really exciting, right? Like it's not, everybody thought like at some point we get to the point where it's, facial biometrics, right? You're gonna have to do a face scan to get into your bank account. And, obviously you use it on your iPhone every day to just log in. That's pretty spoofable now with AI.
Right.
I've heard examples of people getting a video chat from their boss, and it was actually AI impersonating their boss, asking them to send out a wire. And they only knew that it wasn't their boss's because he was wearing a suit, and never wear suits. But identity of your device that we see with the amount of volume that we've seen over time and all the models that we've been able to build around that actually is a really, really strong signal in this world. And so seeing a prospective client who doesn't know who we are because they're not in the gaming industry go, oh my gosh, like this is amazing, and this could really help our business, to me that's the new rush, right? Is like, how do we get this out there now? And I actually think, as I've said to some of our top gaming customers, is we're able to expand our data signals into financial services and e-commerce. We sell now to Netflix and all these content sites, right, that are trying to make sure that you don't have 10 people from all over the world logging into your account. Or if you're only allowed to distribute the hockey game in Canada, that you can't let somebody from the UK log in and use it. So we're we've kind of broken into the media business, but there's other businesses out there that, and I think as we get signals now from all these other industries and bring them back, I think that's only going to help the gaming industry, because it's only going to allow us to see different types of fraud that will help us stay ahead and protect our customers here.
And do you see having some success in the short term by getting involved in other businesses, or because there's some?
Yeah, I mean, we are now, right?
Right.
That's kind of where we're spending a lot of our time is outselling and pitching ourselves to, against huge incumbent legacy tools that a lot of these banks and so on have been using for a long time. I think that we've been able to go in and be like, look, we can deploy our code via AI to your platforms in a couple hours now because we're so far advanced. And again, all those data signals come back and train our models that are going to protect everybody and make our services even stronger than they are today.
Hey, just following up quickly on Alberta and also Canada, Kip. Are there some things that you've seen with the Alberta model that, in terms of policy, that you think other provinces or even other states in the U.S. could learn or borrow/steal from?
I mean, I think obviously we talked about the iGaming element. I do think that you're meeting the demand that's out there, right?
Right.
Or I think people in the U.S. and in sports only markets are, I think operators are losing out, right? Because that customers that want to be able to do both are going to other alternatives. So I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, obviously the thing that we spend, or at least I spend a lot of time on as an operator on the operator side, was making sure that the tax rates also stayed reasonable. I think that there is, there have been some talk about, should we put geofences around schools and other tighter restrictions? I think we generally don't think that's a good idea, because again, there's so many alternative unregulated options for people to go to that if you start to swing too far on the tax regime or too far on tightening up the regulations and the restrictions, you're just going to lose the customers, and ultimately they're going to go back to where they were, right? Which is the sort of unchecked, unregulated markets.
Yeah, and it feels, just quickly, you mentioned the college campuses, and it just feels like there's a lot that has to be done in other areas around young people gambling. It's funny, on the weekend there, I have family visiting from the U.S. right now. Husband and wife, they're both teachers at a high school in the U.S., and they're talking about, they know that their students are betting in their dorms at night. So these are 15 to 18-year-old kids. I know you've read the coverage about what we're seeing on college campuses, but I just don't know. It's hard to think that just geofencing a college campus is going to bring an abrupt end, or you're going to see a steep decline in gambling activity.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a firm believer that you're just going to actually make the problem worse, right? Because you're going to send them to other alternatives that again don't have the checks in place to be able to monitor it. I mean, look, the underage thing is a challenge, right? And I've talked to a lot of parents myself, right? I've seen it, right? Parents will say, oh, well, my 17-year-old is a big sports fan, so I just create an account with my information and let them, throw a couple $100 in there and let them,
right?
And they're really good at it. They really love it, and I strongly discourage that wherever I can. I was like, this is where the bad habits. I think there's a reason it's a strict 21 and over in the U.S. And I think when I was on the operator side, we were out lobbying for new legislation. There were a few states in the U.S. that were going to do 18 and over. We were always strong advocates for making it 21 and over. It is an important part of building a long-term sustainable business, right? And you don't want to see it. And there is a massive swing. The younger you go, the more susceptible you are to fall kind of prey to problem gambling.
Yeah, it's kind of a long way from the days where on snowstorm days we'd get the Remoli board out and grab our nickels and dimes and go play 3 hours Remoli with our buddies, and we might lose 90 cents, right? I think, and especially in regulated iGaming states, to me that's a big concern where you've got some 15-year-old boy who's been given their credit card number by their parents, and all of a sudden they're playing blackjack. And as you know, it's real easy to lose $100 in 15 minutes playing online blackjack.
Yeah. No, it's I mean, look, that's something that I think we're looking at. I think you're seeing a lot of age verification, age estimation, right? So even if, I mean, and that's actually, we're obviously in the KYC business on the upfront side. Obviously we're we can monitor a device if all of a sudden it looks like there's some change in that account. It's not an area that we've necessarily gotten into, but I do think that at some point, some of the data that we have can help. And I know that a lot of the operators are taking seriously the idea of doing estimation where the device that's now using this account looks different than the device that signed up for the account. Right? Oh, by the way, that device, who knows, right? Like has different types of apps on it, or might be seen at a school. Doesn't mean you should shut down the schools, but it means like you should be paying attention to the changes in behavior, and that should send a flag that that you then reach out and check in on the account.
Just a couple more questions. We talked about prediction markets a couple of times on this episode, and I just wonder, like, how do I guess one is GeoComply. Are you now working in that space? And then secondly, given the controversy and the bun fight that's going on right now between some gambling operators and prediction markets and regulators, like, how do you navigate that?
So we are, obviously I think the most well-known are some of our big customers in the US and Canada are now operating their own prediction markets in the States, only in the states that have not legalized online sports betting. We're working with a few smaller operators as well, but I think what we've said to the regulators is what they're trying to do now in the US is make legal arguments to prevent prediction markets from operating in their state. Right? They've got a framework in place. They view it to be online gaming. They got framework in place for legal online gaming, so they don't want it to take place within their states. And so, I think we have made the point that, look, if you're successful in that legal argument, then we play an important part in that. And so, but interestingly, like all the fraud, the anti-money laundering, like a lot of those same challenges as well, the prediction markets have to deal with the same things right there. And so I think that there's, depending on how the whole market evolves, even if sports completely go away, right, as something that they can offer in the United States, and I think we're still a ways away from knowing, I think that all the services that we built up that we talked about before actually are really valuable to that business, and for slightly different reasons, but for a lot of the same reasons too. And so, we've been talking to all of them. I think they know that we're, the biggest operator in this market and have a lot of value that we can bring to them. And so we'll see. But I think generally the regulated side understand that actually if they're using us to geofence out of state versus protect the people within the state, that's because the state was, who's worried about it was actually successful in what they're trying to do.
Last question, just looking into your crystal ball over the next couple of years, like what gets you stoked about the company, and then also when you look at the broader digital gaming industry. And again, GeoComply is a company that was founded in British Columbia. There's a lot of debate about whether or not British Columbia will eventually have a regulated market. As I mentioned earlier, we still only have 8 states in the U.S. with regulated iGaming. I mean, there does seem to still be an awful lot of room for growth for the company. And then, as you've so eloquently put it on this podcast, there are challenges that seem to come up almost every hour right now, and that GeoComply has to stay on top of.
Yeah, there was a minute when I was not working that I thought maybe I'd try to go work in a different industry. And yeah, I think every interview I had in every other industry was like, wow, this is going to be very boring compared to this one. It's tough to see. I do think that you'll see. Look, I think that all of the noise you see around the sort of different regulatory frameworks will ultimately be more pressure that will say, look, it's time to just, there's clearly the demand, if you look at the numbers, is clearly better if you have a regulated market that has whatever the state or province deemed to be the right regulations for their province or their state intact. Obviously there are other benefits by way of taxing and so on that support those. So I think that all the noise, right, and all the turbulence that we're going through right now will lead to another big wave. I would be very surprised if 3 years from now you didn't see provinces like British Columbia following suit and doing the same thing. I think it took 2 in the U.S. when Pennsylvania went. Then all of a sudden the dam broke open there. And again, I think what I'm most excited about really is just how AI continues to just change at such a rapid pace. And, I think we're excited about how it's going to lead to further innovations that are going to help us service our clients better, a couple of years from now. Because I think as long as we can stay ahead of the curve on it, which I think we are now, I think the innovations are going to be really exciting to see.
Yeah, and just real quickly, 2018, that's not even a decade ago, right? So
right.
This is still this industry is still in large respects, if you're looking at the education system, we're in like maybe kindergarten or grade 1 here.
Yeah, that's probably the right analogy. So, yeah.
That is Kip Levin, the Chief Executive Officer of GeoComply. Hey, Kip, thanks so much for doing this. Really glad we had a chance to talk, and hopefully we get a chance to do this before you celebrate the 2nd anniversary of your tenure at GeoComply.
Happy to, anytime, Steve. Thank you very much for having me.
Great, thanks, Kip. That's it for this episode of the Gaming News Canada show presented by Bede Gaming. As always, you can listen to this show on the various podcast apps. You can also watch my conversation with Kip on the Gaming News Canada YouTube channel. We're so grateful to all of our listeners and viewers for supporting this podcast, and we'll see everybody again very soon.